In the back of the Carpathian Mountains, an empire lost gold, and Rome lost men. Between 101 and 106 AD, one of the most bloody wars of imperial times was fought, as the great Emperor Trajan launched a ruthless two-pronged attack into the unsmoothing defended interior of Dacia. Under the stern King Decebalus, the Dacians would not fall easily, and what followed was a blood-soaked campaign of sieges, river crossings, burning fortresses, and broken legions. This was no war of glory. This was a war of survival, and for Trajan would be his greatest victory and his most bloody legacy. Many years before Trajan's legions crossed the Danube, Dacia was an emerging threat to Rome. Located in the mountainous territory north of Moesia, modern-day Romania, the Dacians were not some barbarian tribe. They were a warrior league of settled hill tribes, expert ironworkers, and highly trained soldiers ruled by astute kings, most notable among them, Decebalus. Their country, rich in gold and iron, endowed them with the resources to resist Rome's authority, like most border enemies. During Emperor Domitian's reign in 85 AD, the Dacians invaded Roman Moesia and overran legions and even assassinated a governor. Decebalus had exploited Rome's weaknesses and negotiated a humiliating peace treaty. The Romans paid him tribute and sent him engineers to help him fortify his kingdom. But Decebalus had no intention of remaining a client king. He used Roman aid to prepare for a final confrontation. By the time Trajan succeeded Nerva in 98 AD, he did not view Dacia as a nuisance, but as a knife to the empire's throat. Trajan, a seasoned general and frontier governor, realized that it was prudent to settle the Danube border for good, once and for all. Dacia would be his proving ground, and its defeat would cement his reputation. In 101 AD, war drums were beating, and the Roman juggernaut began to roll. When Marcus Ulpius Traianus, Trajan, was adopted by the ailing Emperor Nerva in 97 AD, Rome gained more than a political successor. Rome gained a general hardened in blood and discipline. Born into this world in Hispania Baetica in 53 AD, and raised on the mores of Roman border warfare, Trajan gained respect not from aristocrats, but fighting at the front. His career was punctuated by stints in Syria, Germania, and the Rhine, commanding legions and fortifying borders. When Nerva died in 98 AD, the legions declared him emperor in thundering adoration. Whereas most emperors who were awed by military power beyond their own, Trajan embraced the army as the secret to Rome's greatness. He was the first emperor in years to set foot in the provinces and personally inspect the empire's defenses. In his time, discipline in the army was restored. There was a flood of recruits and engineering was flourishing. But he had eyes beyond defense. Trajan looked east, to Dacia, not only as a menace, but as a treasure house that would finance future wars and public works across the empire. By 101 AD, the time was ripe. Trajan gathered over 150,000 troops, 6 legions, scores of auxiliaries, engineers, and siege engines. It was not a punitive mission. It was a full-scale invasion, the largest since Augustus's time. His plan: cross the Danube on a giant pontoon bridge, campaign into Dacian mountains, and defeat Decebalus before winter. For the Roman people, it was a righteous war. For Trajan, it was destiny. In spring 101 AD, Trajan took his vast invasion force across the Danube. His legions were borne into Dacia on a complicated pontoon bridge in orderly, lethal fashion. His purpose was swift: move north into the belly of Dacia and force an early, decisive battle. But Decebalus knew the land. He started a series of guerrilla raids in the Carpathian woods, ravines, and mountain passes, slowing their advance with cunning traps and mounted hit-and-run tactics. The Romans, however, continued to push forward. The first great battle was at the Battle of Tapae, a narrow pass that was occupied by the Dacians and surrounded by steep slopes. There, under a suffocating storm, Roman discipline was tested. Rain turned earth into mud, blood slicked the stones, and it was a bloody business for both armies, but Roman perseverance prevailed. The legions, employing shield wall and synchronized attacks, broke the Dacian line. Tapae became the Gate of Iron, a name earned in blood. After the victory, Trajan stopped to secure supply lines and build roads far into Dacian territory. At the same time, Decebalus retreated to his strongly fortified mountain capital of Sarmizegetusa, calling for support from Carpathian allies. It was a savage campaign of attrition, besieged fortresses, burned valleys, and thousands slain. But resisting the Roman assault, Decebalus survived the First War. In 102 AD, he asked for peace on his knees. Trajan accepted, but with humiliating conditions: destroy fortresses, surrender engineers, and break alliances. The Dacians complied. But Trajan knew this peace was to be short-lived. Though peace was signed in 102 AD, it was a thin veil. Trajan returned to Rome triumphantly, a hero. The Senate honored him with a golden statue and celebrated his victory. But in Dacia, Decebalus had never capitulated. He had seen the treaty not as defeat, but as time bought. Within the next 3 years, he rebuilt Dacian defenses in secret, amassed weapons from Eastern allies, and restored mountain fortresses Rome had forced him to demolish. He even sheltered Roman deserters and defected engineers, employing their skills against the empire. By 105 AD, Decebalus brazenly disregarded the treaty. He attacked Roman frontier positions on the Danube River and stormed Moesian forts, forcing Trajan's hand. This was no longer a war of defense, however. This was vengeance. Trajan planned a second invasion, but this time he would not leave until Decebalus was dead and Dacia fully absorbed into the empire. The Dacian king knew what was coming. In desperation, he sent ambassadors to Parthia and the Sarmatian tribes, pleading for help. But none came. The world feared Rome, or had already negotiated peace with it. Trajan's war machine moved north again. Rome deployed this time 9 legions, auxiliary cavalry, and a new marvel of engineering: the Trajan's Bridge, a permanent stone and timber Danube bridge constructed by the genius architect Apollodorus of Damascus. For Trajan, this was not a military expedition, it was a statement. Dacia would never again be an outlaw kingdom. It would be a Roman province. The final war began. Trajan attacked Dacia for a second and final time in 105 AD. It wasn't a punishment expedition. This was war to the bitter end. Trajan commanded 9 legions, among them the elite Legio II Adiutrix, Legio V Macedonica, and Legio Ulpia Victrix, supported by thousands of auxiliaries, sappers, and siege troops, and moved forward with deadly purpose. The newly built Trajan's Bridge, which Apollodorus of Damascus completed, allowed the uninterrupted movement of men and materiel into enemy territory. To Decebalus, there remained only fighting or vanishing. Scorched earth strategy was the hallmark of this campaign. Roman forces burned Dacian farms, flooded mines, and razed villages. Decebalus' forts like Kostest, Piatra Rosci, and Blidaru were stormed one by one, besieged by siege ramps and broken by Roman ballistae and battering rams. Roman troops advanced in testudo formation through barrages of Dacian arrows and javelins, breaking through wooden palisades with sustained pressure. The mountainous terrain offered little shelter. Trajan made do, using archers, engineers, and sappers to breach each defense. By summer 106 AD, Decebalus was pushed into the final stronghold, his capital at Sarmizegetusa Regia. In the mountains and surrounded by walls, it was Dacia's spiritual and political heart. But even this holy citadel could not stand against Roman ingenuity. Aqueducts that supplied the city were cut off. Siege towers were rammed up onto the hills. Surrounded with fire and violence, Trajan began the destruction of the city. It was the beginning of the end, for Dacia, for Decebalus, and for independence beyond the Danube. The summer siege of Sarmizegetusa Regia in 106 AD was the final episode of Dacian independence. Nestled between the Orashti mountains, the capital was no more than a citadel. It was a sacred city, protected by limestone walls, ramparts, and the finest fighters of the Dacians. Inside its walls were temples, palaces, and granaries built with Roman skill. Decebalus had put all there was to this city, and now Rome came to conquer it. Trajan cinched his noose. The aqueducts were shut off. Fires roared on the slopes as Roman siege towers crawled up the hills. Thousands of troops encircled the city, with legions switching off through the front day and night. Roman ballistae shattered stone walls. The once impenetrable gates were pounded by rams and set afire. Inside, hunger and exhaustion spread. But Decebalus would not yield. He had witnessed what Roman mercy looked like. It wore chains. On a final night of moonlight, Decebalus escaped with a few loyal warriors, attempting to lose themselves in the mountains. But Trajan had anticipated this. Roman horsemen under Tiberius Claudius Maximus pursued them relentlessly. Cornered and trapped, Decebalus drew his curved falx one last time, not to fight, but to end his life rather than be paraded through Rome in chains. His head was cut off and presented to Trajan. Sarmizegetusa was plundered, set on fire, and leveled. The Dacian Kingdom, once a dominant enemy, was no more. With Decebalus dead and Dacia in ruins, Trajan was victorious. For the first time ever, the land north of the Danube was brought into the empire as the Roman province of Dacia. It was not only a triumph of warfare, but of imperial planning. In the subsequent years, Roman colonists, engineers, merchants, and veterans descended in great numbers. Roads were built, cities founded, and Latin laws decreed. The Dacian life was incorporated into the ancient Roman machine. Eventually, Dacia would be among the richest provinces of the empire, but success wasn't enough for Trajan. Trajan desired immortality. In 113 AD, the Senate commissioned Trajan's Column, a spiral marble monument 30 meters tall, with over 2,500 carved reliefs recounting the entire history of the Dacian campaign. It showed Trajan not as a butcher, but as a fair-minded emperor, commanding, pardoning, and remaking. It was art, it was propaganda, and it was a lie filtered through marble and legend. The horrors of war, the starvation, the slaughter, the fires were softened, omitted. Rome told its own story, and still the legacy persisted. Trajan's conquest of Dacia was the last great expansion of the Roman Empire. It poured riches, especially gold, into Roman treasuries, funding monuments, aqueducts, and the next wars of the empire. But it pushed Rome's frontiers farther than ever, exposing it to new invasions and uprisings. And when the legions were finally pulled from Dacia centuries later, the province was burned to the ground. But the name, Dacia, would survive, in blood, in language, and under the shadow of the marble column Trajan bequeathed.